My name is Evelyn Monroe, and the first time I felt truly alive was the exact moment I realized everything I'd been taught about, right and wrong, was designed to keep me contained. Not safe, contained. Since I was little, they praised me for being calm, polite, obedient. Daughter of Pastor Elijah Monroe, a local legend with a firm voice and eyes that made anyone lower their head, I grew up as a symbol. The women at church pointed to me as an example. The younger girls were told to follow in my footsteps. I wore ankle-length skirts, kept my arms crossed during services, and smiled without showing my teeth. I knew Bible verses by heart, prayed, with my eyes shut and my heart tight, and for years I believed that was God's love. But inside, there was a restlessness no one could cast out. It didn't scream, it whispered. Late at night, when I'd stare in the mirror and try to figure out why being good made me feel so absent from myself. The night of the party, I went without telling anyone where I was headed. I put on a dress my mom would have called bold, though it only showed my shoulders. I tied my hair back too loosely, and for the first time, I looked in the mirror and didn't apologize for wanting to feel pretty. The party was outside, the church's sacred zone, on the other side of town, where the music was too loud, the bodies danced too close, and no one cared how many souls were being damned per second. I planned to just watch. Stay in the corners, maybe taste a bit of what they called real life, before slipping back into the role waiting for me. But then I saw him. Luca Blackwood was leaning against a wooden beam, drink in hand, gaze distracted, shirt half open like the air itself was too heavy for him to care. Everyone there seemed to orbit him, but he acted like he didn't notice. And yet when our eyes met, it was like he already knew my name. He didn't smile, didn't flirt, just looked at me in a way that said, "I see who you're trying to hide." And then, without warning, without asking, he held out his hand. A simple gesture, no words, but it said, "Come with me if you've got the guts to be yourself for just a second." My hands shook. My heart felt offbeat. But still, I went. I took his hand. And when our bodies started moving, something broke inside me, something old, something my mom tried to hush with prayers and my grandma with fasting, something the sermons couldn't choke out. My body matched his rhythm. No fear, no doubt, no need for permission. And with every turn, every touch, every second of silence between us, I felt the Evelyn born to obey slipping away step by step, sweat by sweat. It wasn't just a dance. It was a birth. And when it ended, there was no kiss, no promise. There was a look, one of those that sticks to your skin and bones, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. Because that night, even if only for a few minutes, I was who I'd always been afraid to be, free. And the worst part, I liked it. And now, I didn't know how to go back. In the days that followed, I tried to ignore what happened, tried to fold the memory like dirty laundry and tuck it deep in my mind where no one could see. Not my dad, not God, not me. I walked straighter, prayed louder, sang hymns with a steady voice, like that could wash away what I felt inside. But my body betrayed me. My feet hit the ground like they were still dancing. My fingers curled in the air like they were reaching for his hand. And at night, when everything went quiet, I'd smell Luca's shirt again, feel the way his eyes followed me even when no one else was looking. No one noticed, at least not right away. I'd learned early how to hide, to smile on cue, lower my eyes, take up less space. But inside, it was like I had a wild bird trapped in my chest, and every flap of its wings threatened to break me open. I tried to will it to die quietly. I couldn't. It wanted to fly. And the harder I fought it, the clearer the truth got. I wasn't the same Evelyn who walked into church head down on Sundays anymore. I knew I'd found him again before I even saw him. It was like the air changed, color when he was near. He showed up at the edge of the field, where the bolder kids hung out at night. I was with a church group, handing out flyers, trying to convince some of them that youth needs boundaries. Hypocrisy, obviously. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear myself speak. And then, there he was, Luca, sitting on the hood of an old car, cigarette in hand, that same calm, dangerous look that seemed to cut through the walls I'd built inside. Maybe I did run. I just don't know if I'm coming back. He didn't smile, but something in him softened, and in that moment I knew he'd danced with me too. And maybe, in his own way, he was running from something as well. We stood there, not touching, not running, just breathing the same space. And I wondered how many versions of me would have to die before I could finally live whole. And then slowly I realized the dance hadn't ended that night. It was only beginning. Going. Home that night felt like squeezing into a dress too tight. Everything in me wanted to resist the mold. My steps, my eyes, my voice. My mom was waiting with tea and prayers. My dad with a silence that cut deeper than a yell. I sat at the table like someone accepting a sentence, hands in my lap, back, straight, answered questions in short bursts. And when my dad asked how the flyer mission went, I lied, said people were receptive, said we prayed together, said I felt proud to serve. He nodded with a soft like my obedience was natural, expected, like there wasn't a storm brewing inside me, ready to rip the roof off the house they'd built over my soul. In the days after, Luca showed up without warning. Never in the same place, never the same way. Sometimes we'd cross paths at the grocery store. Other times he'd appear at the abandoned school field, always quiet, always looking like he knew the world would try to erase what he was. And every time our eyes met, I felt my chest being pulled out from under my ribs. It was wrong, I knew. But wrong compared to what? To an arranged marriage with a church boy who only knew to call me blessed, to a life of starched dresses and measured words, waiting for the day I'd be pastor's wife, like that title was my salvation? The strangest thing was that Luca never asked anything of me, never called me to run away, never promised me love. He just let me be, and that's what threw me most. Because I was used to guilt, control, fear. But with him, there was no fear. There was space. And in every space he gave me, I grew a little more. On Wednesday, I went alone to the old gym, the one with lights still flickering in the back, where the town kids gathered to rehearse dances. They said it was vulgar, that it wasn't of God, that the body wasn't meant to show off. But I went, and he was there, sitting in the bleachers, watching, as always. And when the music filled the room, something in me couldn't take it anymore. I stood, walked to the center, and let my body remember. I danced, not with skill, not with purpose, just with presence. My feet hit the floor like they'd known it in past lives. My hands sliced the air like they were opening a new story. And in the rhythm that ran through me, there was no Evelyn, no Luca, no sin. There was just truth. When I stopped, breathless, sweaty, light, he was standing, waiting for me, a few steps away. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. His eyes said it all. And right there, without a single finger touching, I knew we'd already crossed the line. It wasn't just about desire anymore, it was about choice. And that choice, even unspoken, was already ours. That morning, like so many others, started with my mom's voice calling from the kitchen and the familiar smell of strong coffee. But nothing in me responded like before. My body moved on autopilot, but my soul was caught between two worlds. I sat at the table with my hands clasped in my lap, like always, spoke little, chewed slowly, but inside, everything pulsed with an urgency no one there could grasp. I carried something invisible, but so intense it nearly seeped through my pores. The weight of an unspoken truth, the scent of him still clinging to my skin, the memory of the dance burning hotter than any hellfire my dad preached about. At service, that night, it was like everything had sharper edges. Every word of the sermon cut deeper. When my dad raised his voice to speak of sin and purity, my throat closed. When he said, "A woman's body is the dwelling place of the Spirit," my face flushed. Because my body had felt something else, something that wasn't dirty, something that wasn't shame, something no verse had prepared me to understand. I forced myself to keep my posture, to sing the hymns, to smile at the end, but I left with my chest cracked open and the certainty that there were parts of me that couldn't be shoved back into place. Luca started filling the gaps in my days, not obviously, not like a book romance. He came like a vivid memory, a warmth at the back of my neck, a good kind of restlessness that made me walk faster through town, like the path to him was the only one where I didn't feel out of place. Our meetings kept happening in the quiet, between danger and desire. And the more I saw him, the less I recognized the girl who'd grown up memorizing scripture and thinking happiness meant obedience. He looked at me in a way no one ever dared. No rush, no judgment, no expectation that I'd mold myself into something. Luca never asked me to be different. And maybe that's what broke me inside, because I was raised to please, to yield, to say yes, even when I wanted to run. But with him, I danced. And when I danced, there was no right or wrong. There was just truth, raw, clumsy, alive. But the world doesn't like what's true, and truth starts to chafe when it shows. People at church began looking at me differently. Little questions, masked as concern, started reaching my mom. The sisters whispered in the pews, averted their eyes when I passed. They asked about places I'd never said I'd been. Invited me to pray, but with a different intensity. Like they wanted to cast something out of me that I didn't even want gone. One night my dad called me to his study. Dim light, open Bible. His face wasn't angry. It was sad, and that hurt more. He asked if there was anything I wanted to confess, if something was pulling me from God's will. My mouth opened, but nothing came out, because the truth was too big to fit whole, because part of me wanted to scream that I was finally feeling something real, and the other part shook at the thought of what came next. I denied it, said everything was fine, and he believed me, or pretended to. But that night, in my bedroom mirror, I faced the girl who'd lied to her own father for something she could barely name, and in that look, more than any sermon, I understood. I was crossing a line. One of those with no return, and once you cross it, you either burn or rise. I didn't know yet which side I'd land on. Just knew I was walking alone, no map, barefoot, with my heart too wide open. Time stopped being split by days and nights and started being measured by when I saw him and when I pretended I didn't want to. Luca became my secret north. Everything in me seemed to spin around that silent presence, that gaze that unraveled me with an almost cruel calm. He didn't make promises, didn't say what I wanted to hear, but he offered me something no one ever had: space. Space to breathe without guilt, to exist without a script, to move without apologizing after. Our meetings grew more frequent, not planned, not scheduled. It was like something unseen guided our steps to the same spot, and there, in that limbo between right and wrong, I danced. Sometimes with my body, sometimes just my eyes, sometimes just by being near him, wordless. His touch on my fingers was unlike anything, not invasive, firm, present. When he held me, I didn't feel small. I felt whole. And that was more dangerous than any kiss. But the town was waking up. Small towns have too many eyes. And when a pastor's daughter starts walking lighter, smiling differently, disappearing now and then, the questions come, the assumptions, the judgments. I felt the unspoken words in my mom's small talk, in the grip of my dad's hand when he said, "We're praying for you." Felt it in the awkward silences at dinner, the long looks during service, the surprise visits from church ladies with sweets and excuses. Luca knew. Didn't ask, but knew. His gaze grew sharper, his body tenser, and I felt in every move he made a fear masked as indifference. Not of me, but of what the world could do to me because of him. And still, he didn't pull away. He stayed in his way, like someone who'd already lost everything once and still risked more. The third night in a row we met, we danced in the empty gym until our feet ached. And when the music stopped and the world went mute, he held my hands tight and said, "You know this is gonna blow up, right?" I didn't answer, not because I didn't know, but because there was no turning back. We'd already crossed every bridge, and the fire I could feel. It was coming. The next morning, my mom walked into my room without knocking. She held a flyer from the school, a list of activities, and there, underlined in red, was my name next to an extracurricular dance workshop. I hadn't told her, not because it was wrong, but because I knew what it meant. Knew that to her it wasn't just dance. It was rebellion. It was betrayal. She didn't yell, didn't cry, just looked at me with a quiet sadness and said, "Evelyn, this is the beginning of the end." And in that moment, I realized she wasn't just talking about the dance. She was talking about me, the Evelyn she'd raised, the daughter she understood. And maybe she was right, because that version of me was already dying, and another, slowly, was being born. Freer, more alive, more dangerous. The first thing that dies when you choose yourself is the illusion you'll be understood. I realized that the moment my mom looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. She didn't scream, didn't hug me, just looked away, like facing me meant admitting everything she believed had failed. My dad, though, went silent in a way that cut deeper. Prayers at the dinner table turned into monologues aimed at a God he seemed to use as a shield. And me. I ate in silence, chewing the lack of affection like stale bread. They didn't ask me to pray anymore, didn't touch me. I still lived in that house, but my room felt like an exile. In town, whispers turned to certainties. They stopped saying my name in conversations, like it was contagious. Church women averted their eyes when I passed. Kids were yanked away by the hand, like my presence was an invisible threat. I was the girl who danced with the forbidden, the pastor's daughter who let an outsider lead her astray, the one who stained the altar with freedom, but amid the exile. There was Luca, not as a savior, but a mirror. He didn't try to fix anything, didn't offer happy endings. He just stayed, and that was enough. We met in the same spots as before, but now without hiding, because there was nothing left to hide. We walked together like we dared the world just by holding hands. Sometimes he'd ask if I was okay, and sometimes I'd lie, but other times I'd say no, so honestly it hurt the sky, and he'd just look at me like, "You don't have to be okay to be loved." Over time, I started dancing alone, first in my room, then in the field, then in front of strangers. It was like my body was learning a new kind of prayer, not with words, but movement. Every gesture a confession, every turn a release. And when I danced, I didn't feel anger, or fear, or regret. I just felt. And to me, that was the miracle they'd never promised. The church never called me back. But some girls found me. Girls like me, full of doubts, stifled wants, questions no one answered without quoting a verse. And slowly, I understood that my fall, in their eyes, was also a path opened for others, that my mistake had turned, without me knowing, into a strange kind of courage. My dad didn't forgive me. Maybe he never will. But one night before bed, I found an envelope under my door. Inside, a single sheet with one verse, handwritten. "The truth will set you free." No signature, but I knew that handwriting. It was his. The closest to love he could offer after the storm. And I took it. Because I was learning to forgive too. Today, when people ask what happened between me and Luca, I don't give details. I just say, I danced with someone who didn't try to save me. And because of that, I was saved. I still dance, sometimes with him, sometimes alone, sometimes for other girls who don't yet know they can move. And every time my feet hit the ground, I remember who I was, who they tried to make me be, and who I finally chose to become.